Hey, welcome everybody to the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch class, the abridged code of Jewish law. And we are between chapters, but before we go to the next chapter, we had discussed the tchum, how far we can travel on Shabbos. And this led us to a few questions. So we're discussing if we get stuck somewhere on Shabbos or what happens. So we're going to go through a few potential, hopefully not potential issues, right? Hopefully won't be the case, won't have any concerns. But just in case, give people a bit of an idea of what to do if often they get stuck. You know, often when you get stuck, when a person gets stuck, I won't say you, but the person gets stuck, they're stuck and there's nowhere to ask, or no one to ask. It's, so Lubavitcher Rebbe would often gave an example of why people should study halacha of Jewish law. That the example was that during the Shemona Esrei in the Amidah, the silent prayer that we can't speak or even move for that matter, and there's a sefer, there's a holy book, and it drops on the floor. So are you allowed to interrupt this important prayer and pick it up? So just as a side point, if it is bothering you, disturbing your concentration in the Shemona Esrei, then you can pick it up between the blessings. But Lubavitcher Rebbe gave us an example of a halacha. You can't ask, right? You're in the middle of your silent devotion to Hashem. You can't move, you can't speak. So even if there's a great Torah scholar right next to you, you can't ask. So you need to know yourself what to do. And this was an example given of why people should study Jewish law, study halacha. So anyway, we will discuss. We just started this last week as we finished the chapter of preparing. Right, we should make sure you plan traveling as well as you can to avoid certain places. If you're traveling there, you probably shouldn't leave any later than a Thursday. Sometimes earlier because there's no leeway. You don't want to get stuck on the side of the road or in the airport or something like that. Now, sometimes it's not your fault. Planes get diverted. There can be unexpected weather conditions, massive accidents. God forbid, on the traffic on the highways, and people can get stuck. So generally, what you should do is when you do your planning, you should try and have enough time taking into account any forecasted weather or major construction en route, or and then add some time. Right before Shabbos or Yom Tov is not the time to get the ticket that's $50 cheaper, but it has 3 stopovers. It's that's not the time for that. All right. Now, persons, they're already left home, they're en route, and they realize that for whatever reason, they're not going to make it. So you still have time to do something, but not time to make it home. So ideally, we're talking about traveling by car at the moment. The best thing is to find a hotel somewhere, and well before Shabbos. I shared, I think, a little bit on the class at the time. My daughter, so my grandson was born about, 10 minutes before Sukkah started, 10 minutes before Yom Tov. But earlier than that, we realized they're not making a home before Yom Tov. So her husband was there. There's going to be, and there was, Baruch Hashem, a newborn baby. My wife was there also. So what are you going to do? So at a certain point, when we realized we're not going to make it, so my son-in-law went and he booked a hotel. Got a hotel room. It's about a block away. Baruch Hashem, there's generally hotels near hospitals. And they booked the room and they had it. So again, you have to sign whatever you have to do before Shabbos, the credit card, to book the room, get your key, all these things before Shabbos. Then it ended up that she stayed overnight in the hospital. Well, we organized in the morning that one of the nurses helped and we took her by wheelchair. She didn't really need the wheelchair. Baruch Hashem was, everyone was healthy, but just to make sure she was safe and comfortable. And they spent Yom Tov in the hotel. It was about an hour and a half walk. So we'd organized someone, a non-Jewish person, to drop off food and things on Yom Tov, and both my wife and son-in-law at different times walked in and back and different things. But obviously, mother just giving birth and the newborn couldn't go an hour and a half. So they had the hotel. So again, you see in advance, you're going to get into a problem. So when you realize the problem's going to happen, the earlier you deal with it, the better it's going to be. So the best thing is to try and book a hotel if you see you're going to get stuck. It's not really advisable to start driving, 100 miles an hour on the shoulder of the freeway, right? Because it's dangerous, right? It's very dangerous. Can make a chil Hashem, a desecration, especially someone who looks Jewish, and they driving recklessly and dangerously, and people makes a bad impression of Jews, and a person can get themselves into bigger problems. If they're able to, person's able, if there's on the way a Orthodox community that you can go spend Shabbos, it's even better. Now stopping the hotel might also then mean preparing for getting food, right? So person might have to quick run to the supermarket and see what's available. Many supermarkets, even in the middle of nowhere, have kosher grape juice and matzah and various things. My sister once was going to a camp, and her oldest son is about 24, and he was 6 months old when this happened. So she's going to a camp. It was her, two other younger people in the car, and the baby. And there was a car accident. Not they weren't involved, thank God, but there was one road up the mountain, and they were blocked. Anyway, they ended up spending Shabbos in a gas station, right, in the car. So it was wasn't quite the camp experience they were having in mind, although I guess technically they did camp out. It was hotel is better if there is one around. Okay. Now, if you're going somewhere on Friday, let's say you're taking someone to the hospital or something, and there's a possibility you're going to get stuck. So again, planning ahead, take along a box of matzah or rolls. If there's no wine or grape juice available, then you can actually make kiddush on the bread or the matzah, right? You may have noticed in your siddur that it gives you an option when it comes to the blessing of either the blessing on wine or then it has a blessing on bread. You've probably never seen it done. It's not something we do in the first instance. But if you get stuck, so just in general to know the procedure, what one does if they were in that position, they wash their hands for the meal, for the bread, 3 times in each hand. say the blessing on washing the hand. Then they pick up the challah or matzah, or whatever you happen to have. And then you say the kiddush, the yom hashishi. And then when it comes to the blessing, instead of saying brei pri gofen on the wine, you say hamotzi lechem in the oretz on the bread. Then finish the main blessing of the kiddush, the ends of mekadesh Shabbos, and then you eat the bread. So a person can do that if they get stuck. Okay. Now, danger. So as we started to mention last week, that someone they're stuck on a highway and there's no visible or viable exit in sight. So, and you can't just get out of your car in the middle of the freeway, right? Walking along a freeway is a life-threatening situation. So if this happens, a person is allowed to drive until they reach a safe destination. Okay, this is even on Shabbos. Now, God forbid to get stuck in such a situation. If a person was in such a situation, they should drive until it's safe. As soon as it's safe, though, they should get out of the car. Now, obviously, we mentioned if it's bad weather or nighttime, you know, what might be safe in a daytime in good weather could be dangerous at nighttime, both for visibility, if you're getting out of the car, or due to the nature of the neighborhood, right? So all this should be taken into account. However, you can't keep driving to go to your ideal situation, right? So a person can't say, well, you know, let's say they drive to a safe space to get out of the car, and then from there, there's a half-hour walk to a hotel or a Jewish area. You can't keep driving that extra distance, right? So although a person could keep driving if it's a dangerous situation, but only for danger, to avoid danger, not to get to the ideal situation or destination. Right, so sometimes people get stuck in a hospital, right, because they've driven people there. So a person needs to stay. They need to stay in the waiting room. They can't drive back, although they're allowed to drive there if someone was potentially in a life-threatening situation and they've driven someone who was in danger to the hospital, but they can't drive back. Now, an exception to this is Hatzalah. They don't drive back because they're allowed to drive back for themselves. They drive back to be available, to be on call, because in a Jewish population that can support Hatzalah or requires Hatzalah, a Jewish voluntary ambulance service, you're probably going to get another call that Shabbos. And so therefore, they're allowed to drive back to be in a central location to service the next person, right? So, sorry?
What about a railroad?
In what respect to the railroad?
The railroad gets stuck and you're Arab Shabbos.
Okay, so it's going to be the same thing. I was going to speak about train in order. I was starting with car, but we'll just briefly mention that, you know, so, you know, let's wait till we get to the train, because train and bus are going to go together a little bit, and then I'm going to speak about airplane. So, excellent question. We'll get there shortly. David, yeah.
I'm just wondering, in the car, the area that you pull over may now be safe because it's off the highway, but the fact that you're going to be vulnerable by staying outside all night in many neighborhoods is like an invitation to get attacked.
Yes.
So
yes. Yeah. So that's what I meant about places that might be safe during the day, but not safe at night. You know, so you have to take that into account. You know, sometimes again, in the gas station, especially on the freeways, we have the big, you know, and it's a truck stop and all these things. It's heavily populated. There's restaurants. That's probably if there's not a Jewish neighborhood nearby, that's probably the best place. Something like that. But that's correct. You have to be careful where you get out. Needs to be safe as well. All right. Now, next point. Generally on Shabbos, David.
I'm sorry. So if you're faced with staying in an all-night rest stop, like one of these big rest stops where it's safe, or you can go an extra mile and get to the hotel, should you take option A because it's faster or safer?
Yeah, you should get out of the car as soon as you can. This first safe place. Now, maybe you walk that extra mile before it gets too late. And, I guess a hotel is going to help you in this case because you can't pay on Shabbos. But let's say if it's a Jewish neighborhood, at least you can hopefully get invited somewhere and eat something. You're stuck. Now, in general, on Shabbos, we can't ask a non-Jew to do things for us. Now, this is going to be a situation where we can. So we when we learnt those laws, so we explained how technically, since a non-Jew does not have to keep Shabbos, as a matter of fact, they're not allowed to keep Shabbos. Technically, you could ask, when I say technically, not according to the halakha today, but according to Torah law, you could ask a non-Jew to do anything. But we had a situation where, Greek occupation was really the first time, to a certain extent, in Babylon. But it was the first time you had Jews and non-Jews living in the same area. And at least for a period of time, they were at peace. And they intermingled. And you had certain people essentially having a 24-hour Shabbos goy, doing everything for them, following them around. And they may have technically not broken Shabbos, but it destroyed the spirit of Shabbos because you had people turning on, lighting lamps, turning off lamps, lighting fire, everything you can imagine. So a decree was made that you cannot ask a non-Jew to do something on Shabbos. Now, when the decree was made, there were a number of exceptions. Right? So one of the exceptions we discussed at length when we learned it was for a person who's ill. Now, not deathly ill, God forbid, because life-threatening situation, even Torah halachas, Torah laws of Shabbos are overridden to save the person's life. Never mind the rabbinical law. But, a person, let's say a bad flu, so they're in bed, they're not feeling well. So to help them, we can have the non-Jew turn on the light, turn off the light, as an example. In other words, the decree was never made under these circumstances. So another situation. Now, if your person's in a situation where there's real life-threatening danger, then, as I said, they can do anything anyway. They can even keep driving themselves. But in a place where, let's say, there's a possible danger, it's not so comfortable. So we'll give an example. The person's driving on the Friday afternoon. There's no viable exit in sight. The sun's setting. So we said that they can keep going. Now, so on Shabbos, you can't normally ask a taxi driver to drive him to his destination. However, during Bein HaShmoshes, between nightfall, sunset and nightfall, that twilight period, you can ask a non-Jew to do a malacha if it's for a mitzvah. Now, getting home is a mitzvah for Einig Shabbos, to enjoy Shabbos. So let's give an example. A plane just landed, or they just got out of the hospital, and whatever it is, it's right before Shabbos. So you can enter a taxi before Shabbos begins, even, as long as he's going to reach his destination within about 30 minutes after sunset. Right, so we can go during the Bein HaShmoshes period, the twilight period. So twilight, it depends where you are. Up to 44 minutes. So here, twilight generally is about 44 minutes in most of America. So if you're going to make it before the actual nightfall, the candle lighting is normally 18 minutes before sunset, and another, let's say, 44 minutes after that. So, let's round it off to an hour. It's a drop more, but, so a person could get in the taxi, and even though the taxi is going to transport them during the twilight period, if that's going to get them out of this dangerous situation, they're allowed to get in and they can keep going till they get there. Okay. Now, we just finished studying about the tchum. We can only go 2,000 amas outside the town. So if a person gets stuck, right, if there's a gap in between towns, I mean, today, most big cities, we said it's all built up along the way. But if there's a problem, you can't keep going. So if he's going to leave the tchum on Shabbos in the taxi, then he can't do that again unless it's a dangerous situation, life-threatening situation. Let's say it's not dangerous, then he wouldn't be able to do that. All right. Questions on that before we go to the next point? No? All right, good. Now let's say you're inside a building. Speaking of tchum, person is inside a building, a hospital, an airport, wherever else the person got stuck. It was cyclone is a place of work, whatever it is, inside a building. So if the person's inside a building, meaning, so we've got a fenced-in area that includes a place where people generally eat, and it's even better if someone sleeps there. So a workplace, people eat, they don't necessarily sleep there. Hospitals, people eat and sleep. Airport, people eat, and often there's people sleeping, between flights. So it's considered a dwelling place, a home. So you can walk around and you can carry in this area. Okay. That's if you're stuck. Now, let's say you're being forced to leave your location. So you got off the train right before Shabbos began, and it's not a 24-hour train station. They're locking up, they're kicking you out, right after Shabbos began. Now, there's a few issues here. So if the current location is a dangerous place, then back to what we said before about the driving. If need be, he can drive or get a taxi or something to get himself out of danger. Not to the more desired location, but at least out of danger. All right, now, let's say a person got on a plane and they thought that they were going to make it before Shabbos, but the plane ran late and it landed on Shabbos. So now a person has to remain in the airport building for the entire Shabbos. If you're already boarded and then but before takeoff, and you realize that it's not going to land before Shabbos, you have to get off. Obviously, once it's taken off, you need to stay on the plane, even if you realize that. Don't jump out of the plane while, to parachute down till, before Shabbos. Okay, and then a person, as we said, they could take a taxi to the closest safe location. Okay. Now, a train or a bus. So now I'm talking about a train or bus driven by a non-Jew. Okay, if it's in some, thank God, most places in Israel, there's not public transport on Shabbos, but some places there are. So I'm not talking about if there's a Jewish driver. It's a separate story. But let's say, in most of in America generally, the train or bus drivers, chances are the driver's not Jewish. So you have to get off before sunset, if you can. If again, it's going to be, it's not safe, right? Either you can't get off because it's express, you're not getting to the next stop, so you're not able to get off, or it's not safe to get off in a certain place and spend the night there. Then you can keep going until a safe area to your destination. But once you get off, it depends. If you're in the Tchum, in this 2,000 Amos Noahs, it was all in a built-up city, so fine, no problem. But if it was, let's say, like a Greyhound bus, and you were coming from outside the city, and now you've left the Tchum from when Shabbos began. Now you can only go 4 Amos, about 6 feet. So you're stuck there, in your little spot for Shabbos. Again, unless it's a life-threatening, unless it's a dangerous situation. Now, the airport. If when you land, you were inside the Tchum and Shabbos began. In other words, you were flying over the city at sunset. So when you land, you can walk anywhere in the city. However, if the plane was outside the Tchum of the destination at sunset, or the airport is outside the Tchum of the city, then you have to stay in the airport the entire Shabbos. Yes, David.
Yeah, with the previous example you gave, where a person, if he realizes he's going to land on Shabbos, he has to get off of the plane.
Yeah.
So
before Shabbos.
Yeah. So I'm not sure, but I think some planes, or a lot of planes, would have to evacuate, because they're not going to let you get off the plane while your suitcase is in the luggage, because it might be a bomb.
Yeah.
So that they don't want the person leaving the plane without their suitcase. So they may either try to retrieve your suitcase, or just get everybody off and have to load everybody on again, which is again
so
not
I
our
think
problem.
so this kind of situation I'm talking about is, let's say everyone's got on the plane, and then it happens sometimes. There's some type of delay, and everyone's on the plane for an hour and a half, and you realize this is not going to end well. So then you have to speak to someone, say, look, now probably what they're going to do, if you get them early enough, they're going to allow you off, and they'll remove your luggage. If it's not early enough, then they might not let you off. It's they might already be online for the runway. So then you're stuck. It'd be similar to being on the train or bus, and there's not a stop, and they're not stopping for you. They're not letting you off. But so what I meant is, when you're able to, if you realize that there's been this delay and now the plane's not going to arrive for Shabbos, then you need to get off rather than deal with what's going to happen on arrival Shabbos. But if you can't, or whatever happened, you didn't get off, then we deal with whatever we need to deal with. Okay. Just one of the other things we mentioned about a taxi, we're still about getting in before Shabbos. You could travel during the twilight, but let's say it was a dangerous situation, right? So, they're closing him out of the train station. It's not a safe neighborhood. And so he's getting a taxi to avoid so he's not in imminent danger the second, right? Imminent danger the second, can hijack the taxi if you need to, it's save a life. But if you stay there overnight, it's not going to be, it's not the right place. But Shabbos has begun. So in such a case, a person should ask the driver to open the door for him. Also, when you arrive at the destination on Shabbos, right? Because the door, there's the light's going on when you open the door. There's different sensors, so you should try and get them to do that. Right. Now, obviously, again, if a person's traveling and they realize something's not going to go right, but there's still some time, they should try and contact their rabbi to ask specific advice for their specific situation. I've sort of said general principles. Now, someone asked before a question about a bus or a train. Did I answer that question with what we said, or was there another question? No?
Yes.
Yeah, we answered it. Okay, very good. Okay. Another thing to bear in mind that sometimes the last flight out is later than it seems, right? Meaning that, let's say, going to Arizona or somewhere to the East Coast, it's not only the flight time, but you're losing 3 hours on the clock. You can't just think, oh, I've got 5-hour flight. It's actually 8 hours. Yeah, David.
You said about the taxi asking the taxi driver to open up the car door for you.
Yes.
So what's the best way to pay him?
Let's rephrase that. Let's say the least worst way to pay him. So the best thing is to, let's say a person is, let's say we're getting in before Shabbos. Right, so maybe we should put the money down in a place and let him pick it up. That would probably be the least worst. Now, sometimes it's not practical. Sometimes it's cash. It's a credit card or something. Best thing if he'll take it himself and do everything himself. It's a little bit easier today. They've got the tap ones. You don't have to put in a pin and different things. A lot of these situations, you're sort of stuck because either you're going to have to give out information you don't want, or that people rifle through your wallet, or it's because handing in the money, although getting in the taxi, that solves a life-threatening situation, but handing in the money when you're safe doesn't. So we can be lenient when we're getting out of a life-threatening situation. Once we're out of there, we have to try and be as strict as we can.
If you don't pay the guy, it might be life-threatening.
That's
situation.
right. It could be. Or you might get to even safer location. You'll be in the police station for Shabbos. It's I think a lot of these things you just got to sort of make the call. If when you're in the taxi and you explain to the person about Shabbos and you're stuck and can they open the door when you arrive, different things. And some people be very understanding that, they get it, that person has the religious beliefs and they're happy to accommodate, and then it'll go a lot smoother. Then pretty much everything you say, they'll go. If you see you're dealing with someone who's not cooperative and not understanding, then, maybe we have to, be a little more, I don't want to say break Shabbos willy-nilly, but, we may be stuck a little bit. They might think they're being set up, that they're not going to swipe the card for you. They think, and as you said, they can become aggressive and think that something's going on, So a lot of these things, just have to make a call based on what you see in front of you. a lot of issues. And again, when we discuss the halachas, about medical situations of overriding Shabbos, which to a large extent is the same thing as being stuck in a dangerous situation on a freeway or something. You can only go with the facts in front of you. Someone collapsed. It could be they're dehydrated and they just need a drink. God forbid it could be something far more serious. You have no way to ascertain that. So unless you're a medical professional, maybe you do. But most people, if someone collapses in shul, they're just going to call Hatzalah or call the ambulance, or because you can't take chances. So these issues as well. You may have some explaining to do to your neighbors and why you pulled up half an hour after Shabbos in the taxi. But when a person's stuck, you can only do what you can do to be safe and to. I'll also point out there's safe and perception of safe, meaning some people, because thank God we live a high standard of living and we pretty much have everything we want on call. A lot of people, as soon as they get out of their comfort zone, it's getting dark. They're outside. It's not there. It's not really what they used to. They just start to feel unsafe. Even though it actually is safe, or at least as safe as anywhere else. God forbid we see in the world there can be shootings, different things anyway. There's no guarantees anyway, but what's generally a safe area. So a person should really only, take this course of action, getting attacked or something, if they really have a solid reason to believe that it's not safe. All right, and any questions? I know a lot of what I said was vague because everyone's exact situation is going to be a little bit different. So it's very hard to give specifics. It's just a general idea. All right. Well, then I guess we'll start the next chapter. So chapter 96. We're almost finished the laws of Shabbos. The final chapter. Of course, we can always learn more in depth. There's far more to learn about Shabbos, but at least on this level, the final chapter. So, Sadivav, chapter 96, in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abridged code of Jewish law, Dinei Tefillas Arvis v'Dinei Havdalah. These are the laws of the evening service at the conclusion of Shabbos and making Havdalah. Havdalah doesn't really have a translation in English. If you were going to give a translation, you would say the separation service. But it always sounds odd to invite people to join you for a separation service. That's but it's the opposite of Kiddush, essentially. Havdalah is the opposite of Kiddush. So we have a mitzvah to announce Shabbos' arrival. So by saying Kiddush, and we say it over wine. And just as we have a mitzvah to announce and to usher in Shabbos with the Kiddush, so too, we have a mitzvah to escort Shabbos out and to announce the finishing of Shabbos. And that's Havdalah, and that's also done over a glass of wine. Okay, Boy Test of Sifim, and in this chapter are 16 paragraphs of laws, 16 paragraphs. Aleph, number 1. Nahagin Shemachrin Tfilas Arvis. We have a custom that we delay the evening service after Shabbos. Now, when we say delay, you don't need to wait 6 hours. Even a minute or two suffices. But the idea is we don't want to look like we're running away from Shabbos. Now, I've been in shuls where, unfortunately, 5 minutes before Shabbos ends or whatever, everyone's looking at the clock, and they've got the guy standing at the place where the service is led from, and the stopwatch is down. And the second Shabbos ends, they begin, because God forbid to spend one more minute on Shabbos. Now, I'm not blaming people. There are people who sometimes have, they've got to catch a flight off for something very important, and I know that certain people who are finding it difficult to give up smoking, and then they don't smoke on Shabbos, Baruch Hashem, and then by the time Shabbos is finished, they're like going out of their mind. And so I understand people. I'm not judging or criticizing anyone, but it shouldn't be how we treat Shabbos. Like we're waiting to end it the first second we can. So therefore, we have a custom to wait. Just wait a few minutes. In my shul, we have the third Shabbos meal, and we bench around the time that Shabbos ends. And so by the time we finish benching and we clear the table so we can daven there, it ends up being, let's say, on average 10 minutes after Shabbos technically ends. Everyone knows if you're in a big rush after Shabbos, we're not the place to daven at. That's, you wait a little bit. And the Vahu Rachum at the beginning of the Mariv, people have a custom that they sing it in a tune. So normally a weekday evening service, you're not really singing. Shabbos evening service, the Chazan sings certain parts. Everyone sings certain parts. Weekday you just say it as chant. I mean, not speed reading, but it's just said. Excuse me. But on Motzei Shabbos on Saturday night, many people sing the V'hurachim to a song. There's famous cantorial pieces. Those who are into Chazonis may have heard. V'hurachim. The famous. It's from this, because by extending it that extra minute or whatever it is through the song, it also shows you're not rushing to finish Shabbos. You're taking a little more time. You're holding on to Shabbos a little bit longer. And we do this in order to add Kodesh, to add holiness onto the Chol, onto the weekday. So that's number one. Number two, the Tfilas Arvis, Omrim Atach Anotam. In the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei, the silent prayer, we add a mini Havdalah. So it's in the fourth bracha, the fourth blessing. So I'm sure, most Sidurim have like a grey box or something, or be at the bottom of the page under a line, and it'll say, on Saturday night, add this section. And it's like a mini Havdalah that we say in our prayers. Okay, so that's what we should do. Vim shachach v'lo amar, person forgot. Unfortunately, sometimes we daven on autopilot. If we daven every day, sometimes people. Now, you forgot to say it. In this Kodim Shama is Hashem min habracha. If a person remembers before he says God's name at the end of the blessing, Baruch Atah, and then he's going to say God's name. He remembers before he says that. Then Oimrim b'makim sheniska. He should say it where he remembered. So even though it's not the exact spot, but he still says it. But and then he continues off the blessing, and he finishes the bracha. So as long as he didn't finish that blessing, you can go back. However, you don't remember until after you say God's name. Say Baruch Atah Adonai, right? You say Hashem's name. Then Goyim es bracha chonim hadas. You finish off the blessing. The Eina chayzin, you can't go back. and it's not the end of the world, because it's not the end of the world. But you are going to make Havdalah on a cup. You're going to do the full Havdalah. So, although ideally you should have both the mini and then the full, but after the fact, if you only got the full Havdalah in, that's sufficient. Rak, however, you have to keep in mind, be very careful, not to do any malacha, not to do any weekday activities until you make the Havdalah. So for an example, let's say on a regular week, when he remembered. So what happens like this? A person says the Atan Fanatano, this mini Havdalah in the evening service. And then when it comes to Havdalah, he turns on the light in the room, makes Havdalah. He lights a match to light the Havdalah candle. Whatever he's going to do, he might have to drive home, right? And he makes Havdalah, from shul. He drives there before Shabbos, leaves the car, he walks back. But now he's going to drive home and make Havdalah with his family, right? Any of these things, he's got a problem because he did. So if he said the mini Havdalah, he has no problem. He can do all these things. If he forgot to say the mini Havdalah and he remembers when it's too late to go back, now he's stuck. So what does he do? So we're going to say he should say the words Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'chol. Blessed is the one who separates between the holy days and the regular days, right? And then that's like a mini Havdalah. There is a custom to actually say that sentence 3 times, but 1 time technically suffices. Right? So that's what a person should do. So, but before doing that, person has to be careful not to do any malacha, and yitam klum kodim shabdal alakois. Now, you also shouldn't eat anything before you make a havdalah on the cup of wine. The im asa malacha or tar sarach lachsul is palom. Now, if a person did do malacha, or tam, or he tasted food before he made havdalah on the cup, now he has to do the ma'ariv again, and he says the havdalah. Now, this is also going to become relevant this week, just to mention, because immediately after Shabbos, we have Shavuos. Now, because it's a Yontiv on a Saturday night, we're going to make a special Kiddush, a combination called Yak Nahaz, where it's Kiddush and Havdalah combined. So we're making Kiddush on the Yontiv and Havdalah on the Shabbos. If a person forgot to say the Havdalah part, because you don't do that most Yontivs, right? You take the Siddur, you read the Yontiv Kiddush, and you forgot to add the Havdalah part. And you didn't say the Atah Chanotano, the mini Havdalah in the private Amidah. And then a person, they forgot that they make regular Kiddush and they eat. Now they're going to have to say the evening service again with the Atah Chanotano and make the Havdalah part. Right, so it's yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, well, Motzei Shabbos, instead of the Tanya, it's actually a prayer called V'todi.
Yeah, correct. It's a different wording because we're not making a separation between the weekday and Shabbos, making a separation between the higher level of holiness of Shabbos and a lower level of holiness of Yontiv. Thank you for mentioning that. What I said, I didn't mean it as the word. I meant as that piece. But very good that we pointed out because people might get confused and be looking for the wrong one. Thank you. Yes, Susan.
When you say a higher level of holiness,
Yeah.
can you please explain that?
Sure. Well, when I say sure, I'm also going to say not sure because I will give some explanation, but great tzaddikim who can actually see the holiness in the world will be able to explain a little bit better. You know, they tell a story, someone was, they were worried that Shabbos might be starting soon. They were doing something, I don't recall what it was. And there was a young man who eventually, I think it was the original rabbi, big rabbi, and they weren't sure what they could do, whatever they're going to do. And he says, it's okay, it's not Shabbos yet. You can, didn't have didn't have digital watches in those days. It's not Shabbos yet. You can still do it. Said, how can you tell? Said, what do you mean, how can you tell? The sky changes when it's Shabbos, right? There's certain people who can perceive holiness. They've spiritually elevated themselves or are born that way or a combination, and they actually perceive and know the differences. But for us regular mortals, we'll do the best that we can. So Shabbos is in a certain respect a stronger, a higher level. Yeah, you wanted that.
Let me ask one other thing.
Yeah.
You're talking about a perception of holiness, and of course that can be different from one place to another.
Yeah, no, I mean that the actual holiness, just not everyone can perceive it.
Okay, all right.
So Shabbos is a few points. Number one, Shabbos is a day that God made. Right? In other words, that Hashem created the creative activity for 6 days, ceased doing creative activity on the 7th day, and therefore made a rhythm in the world that we have this 7-day cycle. Now, although Hashem also made the festivals, but it's the Jewish people who declare Rosh Chodesh, declare the beginning of each month, and therefore we have an impact on when a festival falls out, while Shabbos is purely God. That's one difference. Another difference is that Shabbos ascends to a higher, draws down energy into the world from a higher spiritual level. And that is why the malachas are stricter on Shabbos than Yom Tov. Right? Yom Tov, we explain we're allowed to do things for cooking, and once something's permitted for cooking, such as carrying when there's no Erev, you can carry for other Yom Tov needs. Not only now you can carry your bottle of wine to where you need to go to have the meal, you can even carry your siddur, your machzor, your lulav and esrog, or whatever happens to be, your house key. So the reason that the malachas or Shabbos is stricter is because it draws down energy, or godly flow of energy from a higher source than Yom Tov. And since it's from a higher source, therefore for us to tap into it, we have to be more removed from the regular physical world. So this is the idea when we say that it's when we say Kedusha, the word Kodesh that we translate as holiness, what we really mean is it's more separated from the physical world and it's more connected to its spiritual source. So when we say that Shabbos is a higher level of holiness, what we mean is that it's a flow of godly energy into this world that creates Shabbos, and it comes from a higher level. So we have a revelation of greater godliness on Shabbos than we do on Yom Tov. That was probably an oversimplification, but hopefully that was sufficient. Right. So therefore, when we make so if we went out of Yom Tov into Shabbos. So let's say we had Thursday, Friday, Yom Tov, and then Shabbos. We only make the Shabbos Kiddush. There's no Havdalah because we went up in holiness. We've moved up a step, so we don't need to make any separation between weekday or lower level. When we go Shabbos into Yom Tov, like we're going to this weekend, then we're leaving a higher level for a less high level. It's not all the way back to weekday, but it's not as high level as Shabbos was. Therefore, we have a form of Havdalah. All right. Okay. Now, Misha ain't like Kais Havdalah. A person doesn't have any wine to make Havdalah on. He's stuck. And he forgot to say the Atachon tunnel, the mini Havdalah. There's Yesh Lo Kamadinim, there's many laws. You've essentially got to ask a rabbi. Right? This is the story with the bridge code of Jewish law as opposed to the full, but we'll discuss some of the ideas. So if he said Atachon tunnel, he did the mini Havdalah, then he can go buy some wine, or Havdalah we can make on the drink of the land, right? So probably America also, but definitely in Australia, the drink of the land is beer. You know, so you can make on a glass of beer. You know, I guess in certain parts of the world, the drink of the land is vodka, and so you know, enjoy your evening after your full cup of vodka. You know, that's. But whatever happens to be. But you can actually, so if you have something else, you can make onto something else. But if a person gets stuck like that, again, they're going to say this sentence, the Baruch HaMavda Mikodesh L'chol, blessed is the one who separates between the days that are holy and the regular days. And then they can go purchase or get what they need. All right. Any questions on that? All right, we've got 1 minute left. We'll just end with one little thought for Shavuot. David, yes.
I'm just wondering how many people that make Havdalah make the mistake of going to get the candle and going to get the matches and they didn't make Bracha Mavdil Ben Kodesh L'chol, because a lot of people may not know that.
If they said Atachon and Tano in Mariv is no problem. If they didn't, then well, getting it is not so much a problem, but lighting the candle is that's a real malacha. You know, the actual getting the candle, which is a muksa issue. Shabbos is finished. It's not so much an issue, but yeah, this is why we learn halacha. You know, sometimes people, they learn something and they kick themselves. You know, for 20 years, I was doing something wrong. Okay. You should actually be celebrating. Now I know. Because life is all about moving up a notch. You know, we can never, we've always got to keep growing and learning new things. And as we learn new things, we apply it to our life. And even though we're going to go drop overtime because it's exactly 1 o'clock now, we don't like going overtime, but just to just one idea about this is Shavuos. You should know in Shavuos, the Torah is given again every year on Shavuos. So why don't we feel a revelation on Sinai like the first year? Just to give a quick parable, you know, someone's in a cold, dark room. Let's say it's 30 degrees, it's pitch black. They step outside. It's 75 degrees, it's bright and sunny. So the contrast is massive and you feel this huge difference. And then the person's outside for the rest of the day and every half hour goes up a degree. Now what happens is that even though by the end of the day, it's gone up 10, 15 degrees, they didn't notice it because each step was gradual. So only if they would looked at the thermometer when they first came out and they look later and they go, oh, wow, look at the difference. But because it happened gradually, they don't feel it. So the very first Shavuos changed the world. Till then, spirituality could not fuse with the physical world. It was a massive contrast. So it was like, bang, everyone felt the difference. Each year the Torah gets given again. There's something extra energy comes into the world, extra revelation. But it's like going up a small amount each year. Now, if someone could measure that level when they were 15 and measure again when they're 75, they'll say, wow, look at the difference. But because it's a little bit each year, it's gradual, we often don't notice it or feel it. But this extra giving of the Torah happens every year. This is why we can have new books of Torah written, either new insights or new ways to explain things. That ability to add something new that wasn't there in the past, that's what was given that year in Shavuos. So it's not just an anniversary. It's also the anniversary. It's not just the anniversary of Hashem giving us the Torah. We're getting it all over again. And this is where we get the energy to learn more and to grow and to really connect to our Judaism through Torah. So I don't know if my blessings help anything, but they can't hurt. So I'd like to bless everyone that you have truly meaningful Shavuos and you tap into all the energy comes to the world, and you'll be able to grow so much in the coming year in your Torah study by grabbing what's available this Shavuos. So have a wonderful Shabbos, wonderful Yom Tov. And
thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your blessing.
Rabbi.
Take care.
Thank you,
Shabbos,
Rabbi.
good Yom Tov.
Shabbos.
Good
Everybody.
Shabbos.